Hi, I'm the Nomad producer with startproducingmusic.com and welcome to another part of how to create hip-hop beats. If you didn't see the first parts, go ahead and do so now. And if you did, let's go ahead and dive into the mix. You'll notice as we dive deeper into the mix that not a lot is going on. When a track is well put together, there's not a lot to do in the mixing stage. It's mainly polishing, and the less processing you do, the bigger and fuller your mix will sound. Let's go ahead and listen to the drums. So the first thing I've done is to actually work on the kick. There are 3 samples I'm combining, and this channel is the original kick from the arrangement. So let's see how the two interact. So the main channel has most of the sub-frequencies and the weight, and the original kick has the punch and the airy kind of frequencies. Let's listen to the snare. I'm cutting all the sub-frequencies, slightly attenuating high frequencies. Let's see how it works with and without it. Just feels a bit more heavy, a bit more glued together with the kick. Did you subscribe yet? Next up, that drum loop that you might recall from the first session, which I still have sketch cassette on, and I think I did play with the values here. There's also dropouts happening and the cassette type changed. And after sketch cassette, there's more attenuation of high frequencies. I'm assuming that during the mix I felt like it needs to be a bit more lo-fi. So let's see how these 3 interact. Let's listen to it in solo and see what the processing I've done changed. It's almost painful when it's not processed. This makes it really lo-fi. The percussion channel is barely audible and I've done no processing to it. Let's see how it works with the snare. Let's add the loop. So nothing much on the channels themselves, but my mixing template has a lot of parallel processing going on. So I'm actually summing all the drums to 3 separate drum channels, which each has a different compressor on it. One has the 33609, one the Shadow Hills mastering compressor, and the third one the SSLG bus compressor. What I'll do once I have my balance put together is dial in settings I like and then listen to them one by one and decide who I like the most, and then I'll play with the balance until I reach something that I like. So in this mix, the SSLG wasn't used at all, and the Shadow Hills and 33609 were the buses that I chose to use. Next up, my basses before going to the folder are split into a bass low channel and a bass high channel. This is a Michael Brower trick, and what this division gives me is control over my frequencies. If I feel like the overall balance of the mix lacks low frequencies that the bass holds, instead of raising a fader that will raise both the overtones and the fundamental frequencies, I have the fundamental frequencies here and the overtones here. It gives me a lot of power and flexibility. I won't use this 100% of my mixes, but when it does work, it is very useful. In this case, I have the low cut set at 59 Hertz and the high cut at 152. All these overtones I usually don't like all that much. I don't really like the first octave of a bass for some reason. Maybe it'll change. And this will mainly be noise and hiss from the recording. After this filtering, I dial in an LA2A usually and have my bass frequencies in check and then the high frequencies in check. In this case, I've also added the Omega N transformer, which has really cool stuff going on in the low mids, and it really solidified these frequencies. Let's listen only to the low channel. This is more compression than I would usually do, but for some reason this felt good this time. It also adds slight saturation, the LA2A. Let's listen to the high channel. The Omega N even compresses it more in a way. So let's give the bass a listen with the drums. The bass and the kick work together great. No one's bothering anyone. The Rhodes, I did not do anything to. Just works beautifully. As for the pads, there's a bit more processing going on. The first pad sounds like this. I filtered all the low frequencies, which I want to save for the bass and the kick, and the high frequencies because I want this only to support the mid-range and I don't want this to grab too much attention. So let's hear this with and without. It's wider and more hi-fi without the EQ, but I don't want it wider and hi-fi. Next pad. Most of the time it stays in the lower register, but as the part develops, we opened the filter and I just wanted the high frequencies a bit attenuated. It's not doing all that much, a bit more contained. Then we have these two, which are coming and going as the part plays. So this synth, I'm just cutting all the low frequencies and slightly attenuating the highs. And I'm sending it to a very long reverb because it's a very 80s-y kind of sound and that's how they rolled. And this synth barely plays throughout the song, but when it does, it's very cool. So, same drill. I'm sending it to that same long reverb, but in this case, I'm filtering a lot more of the high frequencies and maybe a bit more of the lows as well. Next up in the saxophone section, we have these that are playing the line. I have this EQ on them and then some chorus. Let's see how they sound without processing. And with. I'm focusing the energy a bit more in the mid-range, and this range just apparently bugged me. Yeah, sounds a bit fuller, focuses the energy a bit more here. And the chorus just makes it wider. It's a bit weirder, which is great. Then we have these channels, which are the new saxophones we recorded and the trombone. And with the old ones, so these are still the main sound, but the new channels kind of gave more punch and brightness, just helped them pop out in the mix more. As you can see, there's no plugin whatsoever. These were just well recorded and well performed, so I didn't need to do anything. These channels are just stuff that happened in the outro of the song where everything just goes bananas. So here as well, nothing much going on, cutting low frequencies here, adding high frequencies there, nothing much. Let's hear how they sound with all the harmonic section. A lot of fun. The saxophone that played the solo required a bit more work. This is actually a replacement saxophone that Neil has got. Kind of crappy sounding. It's not his lead instrument. His was just at the shop for a repair. So it doesn't sound good to begin with, and therefore it's the only channel that needed a bit of more intrusive EQ moves. Let's listen to it flat. Now with processing. Now, yeah, you can hear him shouting here. Let's go through this step by step. So the first thing I've done is to add more body with this 200 hertz bell. And then I just found a few frequencies that bugged me and mainly treated them with a dynamic EQ. I'll reach to a dynamic EQ when the problem I hear is not static, because the harmonic content will vary by the notes that the player plays. If you just notch out a frequency, it can really hurt your source. So you'll see now as I play that these bands only react to certain notes where these frequencies are problematic, and when they're not problematic, it just leaves them as they are. This really smooths it out. Next up, the LA2A. This will also help with dynamics, but it also has a tone to it and some saturation. Adds a lot of character. And lastly, I'm using the capitator with the A setting, and let's see what this does. This adds a bit of the edge that is taken away from the EQ, but in a bit of a more healthy manner. Lastly, I'm sending him to a plate reverb. It's the B plate in the 140 by UAD. Nothing more than just putting him in a space. Next up, we have the vocals.